Chapter 8. The Fairy Inaugural Ball. The day of the Fairy Inaugural Ball finally arrived, and the entire fairy kingdom was united in celebration. 2 years ago, when Alex first laid eyes on the fairy gardens and the fairy palace, he would never have thought the kingdom could look more magical than it already did. But when she awoke that morning and looked out of her window and saw the result of all the hard work the fairies had put into making this day as special as possible, she realized she had been mistaken. A double rainbow arched high above the kingdom without fading. The fluffiest white clouds imaginable slowly morphed into shapes of flowers, animals, and insects as they floated through the sky. The air was filled with bubbles all of sizes, and some transported the tiniest fairies from one corner of the kingdom to another. Every plant was bigger and brighter than normal, and swayed in a light breeze. High geysers shot sporadic out of every pond and lake, and never from the same place twice. The kingdom only became more majestic as the sun set and all the stars appeared. They twinkled vividly in the night sky, and with each shooting star, a sparkly tail glistened down as if it were raining stardust. The fairy palace shimmered brighter than ever, and it was covered in millions of miniature lights. Fireworks went off in slow motion above the palace, illuminating the gardens and bodies of water in bright colors. The ball began downstairs in the main hall in the fairy palace, and the sounds of the celebration increased as more and more fairies from around the kingdom arrived. Alex was still in her chambers, too nervous to join the festivities. They were all waiting for her. They had all come to see her. It was more attention than she was comfortable with. Alex had been standing in front of her mirror for hours. She magically transformed her dress into several different gowns, each more eccentric than the next, until she finally settled on a simple white gown with matching gloves. She even styled her hair up into a look Queen Red would have been proud of. She looked beautiful, and more important, she felt beautiful. She wished her 6-year-old self could see her now. Alex would have grown up with such a confidence she had known this was where she would end up. She just wished her brother and mom could see her. A small piece of glass Alex stepped off in her mirror so she could communicate with her brother during his trip, and had been shimmering non-stop all day. She figured her brother was having the time of his life in Germany and wanted to tell her all about it. Alex couldn't wait to hear about it, but she ignored him, waiting to spare herself from any jokes or sarcastic comments he would make about her dress and the ball tonight. She was dreading it enough as it was. There was a knock at the door, and Tangerina and Skyline walked into her chamber. "Hello, hello," Tangerina said. "We came to see how you were doing." "Everyone is waiting for you downstairs," Skyline said. Alex lost all confidence in her parents as soon as she saw the enchanted outfits they were wearing. Tangerina was dressed in a square gown made entirely out of honeycomb. Live bees circled her neck and wrists like floating jewelry, and honey dripped from her ear-comb like teardrop earrings. Skyline wore her long hair up in the shape of a large water lily. Her dress was made of continuously flowing water. It started at her neck and flowed down her body, stopping just before it touched the ground. It was like she was wearing a waterfall. "You two look amazing," Alex peeped. "Is that what you're wearing?" Skyline asked. She and Tangerina exchanged a look that made Alex feel horribly underdressed. "It is," Alex said confidently, trying to rebuild her self-esteem. "You both said I should dress as I want to be remembered, right? This gown is elegant but simple, and it does its job without being overly flashy and without staying on focus. That's exactly what I want, like my reputation to be." The fairies just nodded. "It's cute," Tangerina finally said. They weren't convincing and made Alex feel more discouraged than ever. "I can't do this," she said, and sat on her bed. "I am not cut out for this kind of attention or pressure. I'm the kind of girl who just wants to be at the ball. not to be the belle of the ball. Tangerina and Skyline sat down on either side of her. You have to excuse the kingdom, Tangerina said. The last fairy Inaugural was cancelled when we discovered how destructive his meal was. It's been a very long time since we had something or someone worth celebrating. We're all just very excited. Perhaps too excited. I can't imagine how overstimulating all this must be for you, Skyline said, and I don't think we've been much help. We may have given you the wrong idea about what tonight is truly about. Then I shouldn't dress how I want to be remembered, Alex asked. Forget what we said about that, Alex, Tangerine said. Being a fairy means you must be true in the goodness in your heart, and nothing is truer than wearing your heart on your sleeve. And the more honesty you show in your appearance, the more you will be remembered and admired for it, Skyline added. Alex thought about that for a few moments, but she wasn't sure she entirely understood. So, I'm supposed to wear my feelings, she asked. So to speak, Skyline said. But if you truly believe this gown represents you, then you should have no regrets wearing this downstairs, Tangerina said. We'll give you a few moments alone to think it over, Skyline said. There's no rush. Come down whenever you're ready. They each patted her on the shoulder and walked to the door. Oh, and Alex, Tangerina said before they don't think you're not worth celebrating. The fairy smiled affectionately at Alex as they left her chambers. Alex stood before the mirror again, this time looking into her heart, then at a reflection. In the past year, Alex had experienced so many new phases in her life, living in another dimension, learning magic, going on walks with boys, and being away from her family for the first time. Everything was as terrifying as it was exciting, and Alex wanted her account to reflect it all. Alex closed her eyes and thought of the perfect thing to wear. She raised her wand with a bright flash, transformed her dress one last time. The main hall of the fairy palace was decorated to perfection. The usually golden arches and pillars had been bewitched to change colors as the night went on. A small band of enchanted flutes and strings played music by themselves in the corner. The hall had been cleared out entirely and was lined with tables of food and drinks. There were hundreds upon hundreds of fairies, and not one of them was alike. Water fairies sparkled in the dew, garden fairies wrapped in leaves, fairies with large colorful wings, fairies that glowed like they were made entirely of light, and small fairies the size of insects. The majority of them stood around mingling while others hovered in the air. The fairy godmother was in the center of the party, playing hostess and greeting everyone who came up to her. She was wearing her finest robes, which sparkled like a night sky, and tonight the air around her also sparkled, as if her aura had dressed for the occasion. Mother Goose and Lester were camped out by one of the drink tables, trying to avoid the other fairies at all costs. Mother Goose poured herself and the large goose goblets of punch, and topped them off with a splash from her flask. Tangerine and Skyline waited by the foot of the stairs for Alex to arrive. I hope you cheered her up, Tangerina said. The poor thing looked terrified. She'll be down when she's ready, Skyline said. Oh, look, here she comes now, Tangerina said, and pointed at the top of the stairs. Skyline eagerly tapped the side of the glass until the room went silent. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we would like to present you the fairy of the hour, she announced. She is the youngest fairy to ever join the Fairy Council and the Happily Ever After Assembly, the only fairy clever enough to outsmart the Enchantress, and she is the future fairy godmother. Please give a warm welcome to the one and only Alex Bailey. Skylar made a grand gesture toward the top of the stairs, and the hall burst into applause. Alex walked down the stairs, and the entire room gasped when they saw her gown. She was still wearing the white gown, but it was now covered in thousands of vibrant, live butterflies. The butterflies twitched and fluttered in the time Alex's nervous heart, but they never flew away. Tangerine and Skyline were the first to greet Alex and rave about her new dress. Mother Goose and Lester raised their goblets in a reflection from the drinks. The fairy godmother smiled proudly up at her from the middle of the room. She met her granddaughter at the foot of the stairs, took her hand, and led her to the center of the hall. The palace was filled with fairies Alex had never seen before. The Besides Tangerina and Skyline, the rest of the fairy council members were nowhere to be found. Grandma, where is everyone? Alex asked. Aren't Rosetta, Xanthios, Emeralda, Violetta, and Coral coming to the ball? They'll be here shortly, Fairy Godmother said. They're just waiting for us to start. Start what? Alex asked, and gave her grandmother a suspicious look. You'll see, Fairy Godmother said, hiding a smile. Skyline tapped the side of her glass again and reined the crowd's attention. Tonight we're here to celebrate a girl over the past few months has shown wisdom and still beyond her years. However, before she can officially join the Fairy Council and the Fairy Happily Ever After Assembly, there are 4 sacred tests she must pass. The test of courage, the test of grace, the test of kindness, and the test of heart. The butterflies on the inside and outside of Alex fluttered insanely. Grandma, she said with enormous sighs, you never said I would be tested at the ball. And a amused grin appeared on the fairy godmother's face. I didn't want to warn you. Where are you? She said. Just relax, sweetheart. You've already passed the first 3 without realizing it. Please clear the floor, Skyline said, and the crowd of the guests parted on the sides of the room, leaving Alex alone in the center. A bright flash of light filled the back of the hall, and 7 podiums and a seat on either side of them suddenly appeared. They were the official stations of the Fairy Council members, and if Alex passed the test, she would be given a seat among them. Mother Goose was to present the first test. She went to Alex and put her arm around her. When Alex was 13 years old, she proved her bravery to the world by defeating the evil enchantress, Mother Goose said to the guests. Alex was able to do something 5 queens, 4 kings, and 10 fairies combined could not. She figured out the way to outwit Ismia. She didn't even care if she lived or died in the process. All she cared about was saving the people she loved. So, Alex, it's my privilege to inform you that without question, you have passed the test of courage. The fairies applauded, and Mother Goose took her seat by the podiums. Once she seated, 4 familiar people pushed their way through the crowd of fairies, lined the room, and stepped into the center of the hall next to Alex. It was the old lady and her 3 bratty granddaughters, whom Alex helped in the Charming Kingdom. Wait, what are they doing here? Alex asked. Suddenly, bright lights appeared and began swirling around the woman and her granddaughters. Alex watched in amazement as the woman transformed into Emeralda, and the 3 daughters became Rosette, Violetta, and Coral. That was you 4? Alex asked in shock, and a smile came to her face. All 4 looked as gorgeous as ever. Emeralda wore a long dress made entirely of small emeralds. Rosetta's gown was red and multi-layered, so the bottom of it looked like a giant rose wrapped around her legs. Violetta wore a purple dress with a high collar shaped like a violet. Coral's dress was made of pink flower petals, and Fisher, her walking fish pet, held tightly in her hands, wore a matching bow tie. Being a fairy doesn't mean you're always appreciated, Emeralda said, but even when she was subjected to a rude and unwelcoming home, Alex was able to keep a calm and elegant demeanor. She understands that being a fairy isn't about whom you help, but how you help. She has passed the test of grace. The fairies around the hall clapped again. Rosetta, Tangerina, Emeralda, Skyline, Violetta, and Coral went to their respective podiums. There was only one fairy missing. Before Alex knew it, Cornelius abruptly galloped into the hall at full speed with Xanthios on his back. They stopped to the center and were beside her. Xanthios hopped down from the unicorn. Don't tell me you were a test too, Alex said to her unicorn, and playfully put her hands on her hips. The unicorn happily nodded his giant head. Xanthios was wearing a crisp yellow suit with a long, flickering cape of flames. He addressed the crowd and soaking up the attention for it was all worth. Of all the unicorns in the forest, she could have chosen as her method of transportation. Alex chose this one, he told the crowd. Cornelius snorted loudly as if to say, I have a name. Alex gave this unicorn a chance to prove himself, even when this unicorn of his own had disregarded him. Xanthios continued. She has proven that she believes passion is far more important than appearance, and in doing so has passed the test of kindness. The fairies cheered again. Cornelius became emotional and had to wipe his eye on a tablecloth. Xanthios joined the other fairies at the podiums, completing the rainbow of color. The fairy godmother was next to approach Alex. The entire hall fell silent, knowing the final test was about to be presented. Alex, there's one final test you must complete, and you must complete here, in front of all of us, the fairy godmother said sternly, although it was mostly for show. It's the test of heart, and it cannot be proven with a wand, but only with words. Are you ready? Alex's hands were trembling. She had been afraid a moment like this would happen. A moment when she could possibly let down the entire fairy kingdom she failed. Alex licked her lips and nodded. Yes, I'm ready. In your own words, tell us why you should join the Fairy Council and the Happily Ever After Assembly, the fairy godmother said. It was difficult for Alex to think with so many pairs of eyes staring at her. She looked inside her heart for the best answer. She thought about all the people she had helped as a fairy, and all the people who had ever helped her before she was a fairy. She thought about the fairies around her, about Farmer Robbins and Rook. She tried to form an answer she thought would please them all. Because, Alex said with a nervous quiver, because I know what it's like to live without magic. I know what it's like to struggle and work hard for things. Right now, I think people outside this kingdom have a hard time believing in us because they don't see how any of us truly understand what it's like for them. And in time, I think I can be the fairy they will all trust and depend on because I'll always be one of them. The hall kept very silent while they waited to hear the results. The fairy godmother turned away from her granddaughter and faced the room of spectators. She has passed the test of heart, she declared. The fairies erupted in thunderous applause. The fairy godmother took her seat by the podiums, and the fairy council was complete. A brand new golden chair appeared out of thin air beside the fairy godmother. Alex went to the chair and stroked the armrest. She was finally an official member of the fairy council and the Happily Ever After Assembly, and had her own seat to prove it. The fairy godmother leaned to her. I told you there was nothing to worry about, she said. Alex smiled at her. I can't believe you've been testing it all week, she said to her fellow council members. We knew you wouldn't disappoint us, Xanthio said. Congratulations, Alex, Esmeralda told her. Well done, Rosetta added. Are you going to try your seat? Cora asked. Alex sat in her chair for the first time. She couldn't deny that sitting alongside the rest of the council members with purpose was a very good feeling. The celebration went on, and Alex was continuously congratulated by fairies she had never met. At one point, she noticed someone lingering behind the pillar nearby. She could have sworn she knew him. He was taller than her and wore an old suit and tad too big for him. A feather mask covered his face. He had been watching her the entire night, but never came over to congratulate her or say hello. The more Alex looked at him, the more anxious he seemed to become. Finally, the attention she was giving him obviously worried him too much, and he headed out the fairy palace. Alex's curiosity got the best of her, and she decided to follow him. Grandma, may I be excused from the party for a few minutes? Alex asked. Of course, dear. Alex hurried out the main hall and down the front steps of the fairy palace. She felt something crunch under her feet and realized the fellow in question had taken off the mask and dropped it down on the stairs. She looked ahead and saw him running to the gardens. Hey! Alex called out, but he didn't turn around. She chased after him as fast as she could in her gown. Every time she got close enough to see who he was, he would turn and run down another path in the gardens. Alex felt like she was chasing him in a maze of colorful plants and flowers. Eventually, she caught up to him in a small bridge that crossed over a pond. Freeze! Alex demanded. Show yourself, or I'll use my wand. He slowly turned around, and his face was perfectly lit in the moonlight. Rook? Alex asked. Hello, Alex, Rook said timidly. What are you doing here? Alex asked. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to run from you, he said. I just really want to see you again. I thought I would sneak into the ball and surprise you, but once I saw you and discovered it was your ball, I couldn't help but stay." Alex didn't know what to say. She had never meant to keep the reality of who she was a secret from him, but she hadn't wanted to find out like this. "Rook, I'm sorry I didn't tell you the whole story about who I am," Alex said. "I was afraid I would scare you away if I did." Rook stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "So, you're the next fairy godmother, huh?" "Yes," Alex said sheepishly. "And you're the one who defeated the enchantress," he asked. "Guilty of that as well." Rook took a minute to wrap his head around it. He stared off at the gardens around him in absolute bewilderment. "That's bad," he said, shaking his head. "I don't know what I'm going to do about this." Alex felt her heart drop into the pit of her stomach. "Rook, I'm still me," she pleaded. "I'm still the same fairy you met at your farm and who you went on a walk with yesterday." To Alex's relief, Rook looked up to her and smiled. "That's not what I meant," he said. He stepped closer to her. "I thought you were amazing the first time I met you, and the more I think about you, the more amazing you seem. And now I know just how incredible you really are. I'm not sure how I'm ever going to let you go." "No," Alex said. Her heart began racing and her butterflies fluttered to life. "Well, that's very, very nice. You make me really happy, Alex, in ways I can't explain," he said. "You make me really happy too, Rook," she said. "One of the reasons I'm wearing butterflies tonight is to match the butterflies you give me when I think of you." Rook stepped even closer to her and placed a hand on the side of her face. He looked into her eyes for a moment and then slowly leaned his head closer to hers. Alex's heart was about to beat out of her chest. The butterflies fluttered more rapidly the closer he got to her. They flew off her dress just as Rook kissed her for the first time. The celebration continued in the main hall, despite Alex's absence. The fairy godmother sat in her chair and happily watched over the party around her. It had been a terrific night, and she couldn't have been more proud of her granddaughter. However, the celebration had taken a toll on the fairy godmother, as she was very, very tired and a tad weak. "It's a wonderful party," Mother Goose said, pulling up her own seat next to the fairy godmother. "Nothing will ever beat that mix I threw during the Crusades, but this might be a close second." "Yes, I think everyone is enjoying themselves," the fairy godmother said softly. "Are you feeling all right, Upchie?" Mother Goose said. "You don't seem very festive." "I'm just glad this day is finally here," she said. "The fairy kingdom can now rest, assured that their future is in good hands." Mother Goose took a good look at her. She knew something was wrong, even if it wasn't plainly written on her face. "I've known you for centuries. I can tell when something is bothering you," she said. Fairy godmother said, "Can I confide in you?" she asked her oldest friend. "Of course," Mother Goose said. "If I gave you a gold coin every secret of mine you kept, I'd be broke." The fairy godmother looked directly into her eyes. "Years ago, when I declared Ismia as my heir, there was always something in the back of my mind that told me it wasn't meant to be," she said. "I ignored it. But then later that feeling proved to be intuition. Now I declared Alex my heir, there's another feeling that's come over me and that I can't ignore." "What is it?" Mother Goose said. "Do you have doubts about Alex too?" "On the contrary," Mother Goose replied. "After months of training her and finally seeing her among the council tonight, I feel nothing but hopeful and tired." "How tired?" Mother Goose said. "More tired than I've felt before in my life," Fairy godmother told her. Mother Goose's face fell. "Are you telling me what I think it might be?" The fairy godmother nodded. "Yes," she said with a bittersweet smile. "You and I are the only ones old enough to know how magic works in these situations. We know what's to be expected, but please remember, this is good news. It means we finally found the true heir of magic, and she's ready." Mother Goose didn't say a word. She took the fairy godmother's hand to her own and smiled as wide as she could, given the news. "I think I'm going to retire for the night," the fairy godmother said. "If you see Alex, please tell her I'll see her in the morning." The fairy godmother slowly disappeared in the soft glittering clouds, too tired to climb the stairs. Suddenly, The Hall of Fairies parted. Something was causing a ruckus, and they hurried away from it as fast as possible. 3 virtuous witches had just arrived at the fairy palace, and they noisily made their way into the center of the hall. Each wore a long, ragged black cloak, and they all smelled foul. One witch had cat eyes and twigs for hair. Another was missing an eye but had 2 large noses, and the third had skin so loose it appeared to be melting off her face like wax. They cackled loudly at the fairies, cowering away from them. The 8 members of the fairy council formed a circle around the witches. It was obviously they had come to start trouble. "What business do you have here?" Esmeralda asked him. "We came for the fairy inaugural ball, of course," the one-eyed witch said in a shrill voice. "You weren't invited," Violetta said. "This celebration is for fairies only." "You're breaking laws of the... How'd we ever assembly? By being in our palace," Xanthios threatened. "Witches are not allowed to set foot in this kingdom, and you know it." "Enforce these laws while you still have them, because soon there will be no assembly to threaten us with," the one-eyed witch warned. The fairies whispered at one another. What did the witch mean by this? Xanthios grew impatient and didn't care to find out. "Leave at once, or we'll have you thrown in Pinocchio prison," he threatened. The witches cackled even harder in his attempt to frighten them. "But if we leave, you'll never receive our gift," the witch with cat eyes hissed. "We didn't come all this way empty-handed." "We don't want your gift," Tangerine said. The bees flying around her neck and wrists flew at a quicker pace. "Go back to wherever it is you came from." "Trust us. You want us to have the offer," the witch with waxy skin wheezed. "It's less of a gift, more than a prophecy. It's something the witches have kept to themselves for a great while, but since it's such a ceremonious night, we thought we'd share it with you." "We don't want to hear your ridiculous prophecy either," Rosette said. "I do," Coral peeped, speaking on behalf of the curious fairies in the room. "Couldn't hurt us to listen whatever information they want to give us." The members of the fairy council looked at one another, but no one objected. "Very well," Esmeralda said. "If the witches promise to leave us in peace when they finish, they may share their message with us." The witches scowled at the audience of fairies. They held hands and formed a circle. The witches cocked their heads up to the sky, and with their mouths and eyes began to glow. A strong breeze swiftly blew through the palace as the witches chanted in rhyme and unison. "Fairies, listen you well, for there is truth in the sights we foretell. Happily ever after will not last when it's greeted by a threat from the past. One by one the kingdoms will fall apart. From battles they'll lose and wars they'll start. Fairy blood will be spilt by the gallons when you face the army of thousands." The witches howled with laughter at the conclusion of their prophecy. All the fairies had to cover their ears from the screeching sound. "Get out of this palace before I turn you into ashes," Xanthios said, and his whole body burst into flames. "Yeah, and then I'll kick your ashes into next week," Mother Goose added. The witches left the palace, cackling as loudly as they could the entire way. The fairies looked at one another anxiously. Did they have any reason to believe a word of what the witches had just said? Was an army of thousands really on its way? And from where? Do not worry," Esmeralda told them. "This was nothing more than a foolish attempt to ruin our evening, and I refuse to let them succeed. I say we continue our festivities in the gardens, where we can celebrate under the stars." The fairies cheered, and Esmeralda led all the guests through the hall and outside the palace. "Aren't you coming, Mother Goose?" Coral asked as she left with the others. Mother Goose was the only one who had stayed behind. "Sure," she said. "I'll be out in a minute." "All right," Coral said, and flew off with the others. Mother Goose's eyes darted left and right, and small beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. She was the only person to whom the witch's prophecy meant something. Everything the witches had foretold was connected to a dark secret Mother Goose had kept for a very long time, a secret that she had never told anyone, not even the fairy godmother. But years ago, Mother Goose had done everything in her power to make sure the army wouldn't cross over. Was the threat still alive? There was only one way to find out, and there was only one person who could help her, and he was worlds away. Mother Goose took a giant swig from her flask and hopped on into Lester's back. She steered him into the window of Alex's room. Mother Goose climbed through the window and had looked around. She found a magic mirror. The magic mirror placed in the corner and touched his glass. There was no response, and Mother Goose looked desperately around the room. On Alex's nightstand, she found the piece of mirror that had been chipped off, and her relief was shimmering. He was trying to contact Alex at that exact moment. Mother Goose picked up the piece of mirror, and the round freckled face of the person she was trying to contact appeared. "Oh, Sea-Dog, thank God it's you," Mother Goose said to Connor. "Listen, we need to talk. I need your help." Alright, that is the end of Chapter 8. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more from the latest stories of Grimm Warning and more books to come. And also, if you have good recommendations for me, don't forget to comment down below for any good reading for me later on in the future. For overall, I hope you have a wonderful day and hope you enjoy the reading. Bye!